it had significant impact, I think, on both men's careers for different reasons, because we talk about Froch. Obviously, Froch had one more fight, which was the rematch against George Groves in front of them 80,000 people at Wembley Stadium, which was a massive moneymaker, which paved the way for people like Anthony Joshua to fight in front of 90,000 people at the same stadium. So this was a bit of a, I'd like to say it's a pioneer fight, really, for British boxing, because this pioneered and ushered in a new era where fans were from all over different sports were transitioning over just to watch these big marquee fights in such a huge stadium, because Eddie Hearn was able to work his magic and actually sell it so much that he was able to get that many people interested, and the fight itself was so significant that for me it was a big pioneering fight for recent memories.
Yeah. Did you go, Sean? I went myself. Me and my wife went.
No. You know what? I would have loved to have gone to it. But again, I watched it with my wife, and we loved it. We couldn't wait for the second fight. And again, the build up to the second fight wasn't as good as the first fight. However, it was still entertaining. It still left a lot of questions in your mind as to, can Groves do it? What ifs and buts? There was loads of them going into the second fight, and that second fight was very tentative up until the ending of that fight as well, and that wasn't as good as this first fight that we're talking about, but it was still a very good fight.
It was still a good fight, and I thought, I don't know, I could sense a shift for Carl. I think he realised he underestimated him, and he also got his family a little bit more involved in the build-up, didn't he? I think George Groves, one of his, I think Carl Froch's cousin had a little go at him, didn't he? And he was offering him out, sort of. One of the presses. And you can see George was a little bit, what's going on? And I think he went over to Eddie Hearn, like, you're going to help me out? You can't have this, you can't happen. And then he's sort of laughing. And I felt a bit sorry for him there. And I think they sort of bullied him. I wouldn't say they bullied him. I don't know. I suppose they did. They sort of, he got his family involved. He you could see he was up for it. He probably trained as hard as he ever trained before. He trained a lot harder, put it that way. And in his forefront, Cole's thinking, I'm going to get rid of this kid. And I think he showed his class again, which was good to see. And I think he was right to finish Cole. For me, I think it's a good fight in front of 80,000. Or was it? I don't think it was 80. Was it knocking on 75? I don't know. But he signed off on the right one. To be fair.
Yeah, no, he did, and obviously that was the end to his career. And there was loads of talk of him coming back and having fights with people like Andre Ward, and there was so much talk of him coming back. And to be honest with you, at the age, he was 36 years old when this second fight happened, and I was more than happy for him to sign off on that. Really, I mean, I personally at the time the fight happened, I wanted George to win. I'll be honest, I wanted George to win that fight, but in hindsight, looking at what happened in both men's careers, that was a good way for Carl Froch to sign out as at the top of his game, and then for George Groves obviously to move on, and for me that's where we move on to sort of the aftermath for Groves, really, because that is another tale. That's like, this is one tale, and then we get the next tale, which is a second wind for George, wasn't it? Because we move him on, and he gets another world title shot against Badu Jack, loses that. He fights guys like Brophy, beats Martin Murray, has that fight with Edward Gusheniek, which was a significant fight for obviously George Groves because of the injuries that Gusheniek suffered afterwards, and for a lot of men that could have completely changed the way they fought. But in his next fight, he beat Fedor Chudinov finally on his fourth attempt and won the WBA super middleweight title in Sheffield. Finally,
good. I was really pleased for him that night. Obviously, I'm not going to try and pronounce the guy's name that got injured, because I'm terrible with names. I don't want to murder his fella's name. But I think that impacted on George a little bit for me. That although he did go on to beat, and it was a tough fight against Fedor. Is it Fedor? Fedor. Shouldn't have, isn't it? It was a good fight, tough fight, and I thought I was really pleased for George. As you say, fourth attempt. I think he was very close at times, and he really knuckled down. And I think was it Shane McGuigan as well in his corner. I think that made a difference mentally for George, and I think he realised that he needs to. I think in his head he thought he was already there. I think he's actually said that. He has actually said that before, that he was at top of the mountain, but he hadn't been. He never won a world title, and I was really pleased for him, really pleased, and he deserved it. And I think a lot of people were. And then obviously on to the World Boxing Super Series after that.
Yeah, I tell you what, it's like when you think of George's career now, and you think about the the Carl Froch fights, and I know them fights took a hell of a lot out of him. He eventually got that world title in his fourth attempt, but then he goes onto the World Boxing Super Series, beats Jamie Cox with a great body shot, beats Eubank Jr. after being wrote off again. I think in that fight he was kind of wrote off as, oh well, he's past his best, he's shot worn, he's damaged goods, and Eubank Jr.'s younger, fresher, is going to stop him, and he did a number on Eubank Jr. in that fight as well. And to say he had a great career was, I think, for me personally, no matter what people say, the guy has achieved a lot more than what most people will ever achieve in boxing when they turn professional.
Definitely, and I do think people overlook that a little bit. I know he will always compare his record to James DeGale, which is always an interesting. They were both very good fighters. Obviously, both retired this year, and I do think, for me, George probably did edge it, obviously, with the Froch fights as well, and with the dominant display of Eubank. Eubank was literally, I remember Nazim just killing him on ITV. He was slagging him off left, right, and centre. And I mean, rightly so. Eubank didn't look great, but for me, for me, Eubank isn't really. I think he's a little bit overrated personally, anyway. But great performance from George, and I thought he was, his jab and the right, and his overhand right, and it just kept him off of him. Good footwork. As we've seen from George with low hands, and he's able to just move out of danger. It was excellent. One of his best performances, that Eubank, and it was really pleasing to see that one as well.
Yeah, it was pleasing to see that one. And he gets his final bout, and the bout he retired after, which was Callum Smith, which was for the WBA and WBC Diamond Super Middleweight titles. It was the final of the World Boxing Super Series, and unfortunately he got beat. He got stopped with what was a wicked body shot, and ironic as well that he stopped Jamie Cox 2 fights earlier with a great body shot, and practically got stopped himself with a body shot just as wicked. Yeah, it was like poetic, wasn't it? It was like poetic justice. It was so strange. Like
I like that. Yeah,
it was just so strange that he'd had this second wind. He was a world champion. He looked as good as ever, beating Eubank Jr. And then he went in against Smith in a very close fight. And let's not get me wrong, he wasn't completely overshadowed in that fight. It was quite close leading up to the stoppage. I think a lot of people had it sort of, some people had it to Grove, some people had it 2 or 3 rounds up for Callum Smith, and he was in there all the way up until the end and valiantly, went out on his shield, and that's the way I always seen Groves' career going, if I'm being honest. When I talked about the Kenny Anderson fight earlier in the episode, I was saying that was a lot of that fight, you should go and watch it, because that is a foreshadowing fight. Honestly, that fight, when you watch that, that will make you realise that actually Groves' career was always destined to go the way it was going to go. And if you're a believer in anything, or if the listeners are a believer in anything, I think when people say, oh, it's fate, that fight, and then looking back at his career, that was like it was meant to happen. It was so strange that his career ended the way it did, on the note that it did, and then he just had some epic fights, some great nights, and this particular one, the Froch Groves one, for me was it was his defining, although he lost on the record, it was one of his defining fights in his career, and which is why the voters, the users of Twitter and the listeners of the podcast voted it as a legendary night to record.
I agree with him. I agree with you as well, Sean. I think it was a good performance, a great fight, and one with, for the aftermath of what happened, it was a huge significance for British boxing. And credit to George, credit to Cole as well. It wasn't Cole's fault that Howard Foster stopped it early. So, although he got the boos, he's probably getting booed maybe because of his performance, really, not necessarily the actual decision, because it wasn't Cole's fault.